09. And start with public comment. Is anyone on from the public?
There isn't anybody yet.
Okay. Next meeting minutes, we have June 6th, 13th, and 27th to approve. Two of them were already out for a while, and then Don resent them with the third. Has everyone had a chance to read them and get them back to Don? We need to postpone that, or can we get a motion to approve them?
Yeah, I'm happy to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes as submitted.
Okay. Second?
Second.
Brian. Okay, thank you, Brian. All right, we'll get a roll call vote then. So we have Frank?
Aye.
Todd?
Aye.
Geetha?
Aye.
And Chris?
I'm just going to abstain since I wasn't there for one of them and much of the other.
Okay. And Mark? Mark, motion, sorry.
Yeah.
All right, so that's passed. We'll move on.
This is Lisa. I say yes too.
Okay, Lisa, I didn't know you grabbed on.
That's okay. I'm glad I finally got on. It took me a while today. Sorry. Bye. I mean, I'm up. Bye. I'm just going to be mute now. Bye.
Hey. Anyone else?
Okay, Chris Conway's in the attendees, just so you know.
Okay, I'm not coming. All right, so moving on, Lynch, we're gonna start on the geotech investigation schedule with Charlie. If you want to take that, Charlie.
Yep, they theoretically, I haven't got confirmation, but they theoretically started their field work today. So hopefully there was a drilling rig out there.
There was.
And
They were there.
Good. So Chris can confirm, and they should be at it for the next 3 or 4 days, much of the week. And they'll be, taking borings in the locations that were identified in the proposal. And then I would imagine it'll be at least a few weeks before we get any results back.
Okay. All right. Any questions on that for Charlie? If not, second one is design massing update. That's also you, Charlie.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen, I hope. And if I do, I'm going to show you, I'm going to show you a bit of an agenda, and then, okay, let me see if I can do this. Too many things open all at once.
Pete Lawson's also in the attendees.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see if we can do stream 2. So in theory, you're looking, I hope, at a cover sheet.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, this says school building committee. Cool. Okay. So let's see here. Why am I in a problem now? Okay. Does that say project status and schedule?
Yes.
Neat. So we are underway. Schematic design is underway. Things we've been doing, we had a regulatory meeting with the town, departments to go over mostly site planning issues. We've had a site design meeting also with the district to talk about kind of programming requirements for site. We had, we may have already talked about it. We had the marathon 2 full days of programming meetings with faculty and staff to get input on, kind of teaching and learning. The geotech investigation we just talked about. There's an upcoming flow test, which is one of the things the MSBA is remarkably preoccupied with because they don't want to find out later that we needed a fire pump. So That's going to happen soon. An engineer will be out with the water department doing that in the evening. And we've submitted, per the request of the Conservation Commission agent, we have submitted to them a preliminary riverfront analysis, which is basically diagrams and calculations on encroachment into the 200-foot Rivers Act setback. And that is being reviewed now by the Conservation Commission. The end result, we hope, of that will be an informal preliminary discussion with the Conservation Commission at a meeting and with our engineering team, so that we're far from actually doing any permitting. However, this is kind of a courtesy to make sure that there's not going to be something that's going to make the whole thing go sideways later. So that's has not been scheduled. We have upcoming sustainability subcommittee meeting coming up. We have Eversource has set up a meeting to talk to the town and the district about possible grant opportunities for net zero ready schools. So that's coming up. Andrew has been talking to our kitchen consultant about setting up conversations with the kitchen. We're going to have a systems meeting with the district again fairly soon, systems and sort of operations. So all those conversations are ongoing. They inform the design. The schedule in the broadest of terms is that we're trying to put together a cost estimate package by the beginning of August sometime. Some magic date is yet to be established, but the first week in August for sure, because we want to have the estimate back by the third week in August, and we need to give them most of 3 weeks to do that. And then, of course, I think we all know that the final MSBA SD submission is due September 1. So that's kind of where we're at with schedule. So I'm going to go through fairly quickly a design kind of update and just show you where we are with some of the design topics. This we're going to have to do again multiple times because we really are still in early-ish stages. But I don't understand why you're not seeing that slide, and I don't understand why. Let's go. There we go. So here is a site plan. This site plan is based on input from the town, and it has been modified since previous site plans that you would have seen in the earlier phases. Generally speaking, the general principles of it haven't changed, but there's a couple of obviously significant things that would have shown up to you when you looked at the geotech proposal, if you looked at the diagram carefully. But the whole building has moved somewhat south away from the soccer fields, but it has not moved on top of the old lynch. So you could be building the new lynch while you were demolishing the old lynch. There remain 2 loops for pickup and drop off, but when you come in from the Horn Pond Brook Road side, Royal Street Road side, and cross the brook, the traffic pattern used to be that you entered quite quickly into a parking area and the like. You do not do that anymore. You now loop down in a clockwise way and then enter the parking lot from the south. And that was to discourage people, parents and all, from just whipping into the parking lot and trying to drop off their child in the parking lot. So that's a more controlled sequence from a vehicular circulation point of view. The loop on the west side has been cleaned up. You come in off of Brantwood Road. It's a single loop. It's no longer a double loop, so it's taking up a lot less impervious. There are, and it can be a double loop for buses and for vehicles. And somebody dropping it or picking up a child can loop in and loop out. We have about the same amount of spaces as we had previously. And we have we're proposing a turf play area in the front because the concern is that a small grass field is never going to survive. And then a fairly large multi-age accessible play area that would serve kids of different ages. There are rain gardens proposed to deal with stormwater. And obviously there will be plantings in the back. In the front, there's an outdoor classroom, and obviously, as we've had in the past, pre-K play. And in the rear, there is the hope. I mean, it's still concept. We're still in concept design, but the hope is we have outdoor learning spaces there as well. One of the requests was that there would be a play area near the soccer field, so that if a parent has a young child who has a child playing soccer but has a young child who wants to play, that's an opportunity. There's now, and this is also a new aspect to it, there's now a walkway from Pond Street that goes directly onto the site, so that somebody on a bike or a pedestrian can directly make their way to the fields. And obviously you'll be able to park and go to the fields that way. So, in principle, we've maintained the possible future pedestrian bridge, the maybe bridge. And otherwise it lays out, fairly much the way it used to in terms of orientation and the like. So,
Chris, Charlie, I got a question. I don't know if you're ready for questions.
Sure, happy to.
I'm just curious, with the gate on the lower side connecting the two streets, where was that? I see it on the left-hand side of your cursor there.
Yeah.
How was that determined? Like a certain amount of parking on each side accessed, or?
Yeah, I mean, the parking is relatively equal. It's going to be, again, it's an operational thing. One of the things the landscape architect proposed was, gee, this could be staff parking, so you don't have to worry about visitors. The gate can be used or not used, and we've had this conversation multiple times. This is it is going to be an operational question. Does the town and the district want to keep that as a through road? Do they want to close it off during the day? Do they want to, you could even use orange cones to close it off. I mean, there's a multitude of different ways.
It could also be relocated to the right-hand side of that group of 28 parking also then too.
Absolutely.
If they feel there's too many cars coming off of the neighborhood.
Correct. I mean, the traffic study, the counts were kind of balanced, believe it or not.
All right.
So, there's a working premise that they might be pretty similar in terms of counts from the west and the east. And that's why you're seeing kind of the gate over here, because the 40 plus 20, 40 plus 20 and change, there's similar counts. If during the course of the year, it turns out that's not working very well and people are complaining, we can put a second gate. I mean, it's not super expensive to put in gates, and you can keep it open. There's a multitude of ways of doing this. But in principle, the idea is you really do need a way to get through for service vehicles, for emergency vehicles, for plowing and the like. But you may want to close it off for the purposes of the neighbors being worried about people blowing through their neighborhoods.
And what is the truck route for delivery to that service area?
So the truck route we talked about was off of Pond Street. So a panel truck or even a large vehicle would turn in and then make a turn and back in. And there are some semi-trailers apparently that do show up. So we need to make sure our turning radiuses, which the landscape architect
that looks pretty tight there,
that the turning radiuses will work for a semi-trailer for the occasional, and then they would have to loop back out again.
right?
So we're talking to them this week about grading and the like, and I can certainly bring up turning radiuses and make sure they run their turning radiuses. If they haven't, tell them to.
We're calling that the staff lot, right, Charlie?
We're not calling it anything. You guys can tell us. I mean, yes, the fact of the matter is you can put up signage. You could do it any number of ways. You can encourage teachers to park in certain places.
I wasn't asking for your permission. I just thought that's what we were calling that particular. I thought we were trying to match up with staffing, but.
Well, so.
It doesn't matter. It's okay. Well,
I mean, you could park all the teachers in the front, or it kind of.
But my question really is about, and this is not for tonight, and I don't expect you to be an answer, but I'm not sure when our deliveries come. So
right.
I can talk to school admin and see what the kind of the normal schedule's been.
Delivery schedule. Okay. that's something we can follow up on too. So that's the site plan, and then floor plans. There's a first floor plan, and again, it's not dramatically different than you would have seen at the PSR phase, but it's obviously more developed. Pre-K is on the right in the yellow.
We haven't seen it yet.
What?
I'm still
Oh,
looking at the
shoot.
site
Wow.
plan.
I can't understand what my problem with advancing slides is tonight. Should just advance fine. Not seeing any of that? Sorry, you're not seeing that.
Charlie, if you're in presentation mode, you might just try the,
There we
okay,
go.
There you
you
go.
got it.
But I'm not sure why I'm having trouble. I am in presentation mode, and I'm not sure why I'm having trouble with it.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest if you get out of presentation mode and kind of go back and forth that way, that may work. But we can see this.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry for the transitions being so herky-jerky here. I apologize. I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong. Anyway, pre-K in the yellow on the right. One of the things we have a much better understanding of now is kind of administrative functions and how all of that works. So we have a much more detailed understanding of where administrators need to be, which is also the case for main administration. K continues to be on the first floor with pre-K. So this continues to be this concept of the early learning center. We have 3 connections classrooms, 1 on each floor. We have a teacher planning center on each floor that's right at an entrance and right at kind of the knuckle between the 2 sort of wings here. So that gets a lot of good visibility from a sort of supervision point of view. Otherwise, organizationally, it is not too dissimilar. Music is on the first floor near the platform in the gym. Kitchen is behind the cafeteria. Most of the service is over on the west, where we were just discussing deliveries. And there are still the 2 entrances, the main entrance where you enter, where you'll come to administration. Somebody can let you in or not let you in through the vestibule, but the same goes, this pre-K is set up exactly the same way. You get buzzed into a vestibule, and then you have to be let into the building from there. So they're both controlled entrances. There's obviously exits out to the rear into the kind of the outdoor classrooms facing the soccer fields. There's a possibility, and I'm not sure this is going to work, there's a possibility of having kind of doors to the outside at the cafeteria as well, if we ever wanted to set up any kind of a small outdoor seating area or anything. And I don't know if that's going to make any sense or not. Pre-K has multiple ways out to the play area to the south of their wing. So that's kind of what's going on the first floor. So I wouldn't say there's anything dramatically different. But it has been further developed, as I said, in terms of trying to articulate where things should be.
Charlie, originally, wasn't there a way to close off, like after the common area, you could come in and use the cafeteria and gym and not get into the remainder of the school on the?
Yes, that's still the intention. I apologize. The doors are missing there.
Okay.
And it's the same on the next 2 floors as well.
Right.
And Charlie, forgive me if you already mentioned it and I missed it. It looks like, so the plan for the stage off of the gym kind of auditorium combined space is, I see your note there, -2 feet, right? So you're sort of sinking that down a little bit.
Well, so we're going to meet with the landscape architect this week to talk about grading, but we had the idea that if you lowered the gym by 2 feet, you could walk directly onto the platform from the lobby. And that doesn't really help in terms of accessibility for somebody in the gym going to the stage. We'll still need a ramp and a stair in that space. However, it could help with just wheeling off large equipment, musical instruments and the like, those kind of things. So we thought if it made any sense from a grading point of view to drop down here, because we do want to drop down to the soccer field, obviously, and make that an accessible route. It might make some sense, but so that was our thinking. However, we have not for the grading. So we have to sort of establish that with the landscape architect. But yes, you're right to say that we are showing that right now. We're showing, 4 risers there that get your 5 risers that get you down to basically a quote unquote lower lobby.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a stair that goes up, and the stair that goes up was tucked in here. And then we just tried something with kind of this big half circle, but I'm not convinced that's the right thing to do. So we have to keep looking at that. That's
Yeah.
a little bit over the top, maybe.
Yeah, it looks a little tight to the platform entrance too. Is there any need for like back of house space for the stage, or do they deal with it?
Unfortunately, the way the MSBA treats these things, they just don't give you a whole lot of square footage.
Yep.
And they also, if we call it a platform and not a stage, we don't really have rigging and the like. I mean, we can kind of do, maybe, we don't even usually do curtains. We may do a door across here just so if Jim's in session, the balls don't go flying up onto the platform. But these tend to be pretty low key performance spaces. They don't have a lot of bells and whistles. I mean, they'll have good lighting and good acoustics, but they're pretty low key otherwise. We don't have backstage curtains and stuff like that typically. So I think people tend to be disappointed. Drama people and music people will be disappointed, but it'll be similar to your other elementary schools, I imagine.
Yeah.
But that's what the MSBA gives us, and there's not really a good way to expand it much without taking square foot space out of somewhere else. And we're showing a kitchen that's large enough to be a full service kitchen. The kitchen consultant is working on that.
So just from a kind of performance standpoint, you kind of want the opposite in terms of elevation. You would kind of want the gym to be higher than the platform for viewing versus having the platform be higher than the gymnasium from a floor seating standpoint. But I don't know what those. I don't know obviously what the height of that platform is either. So
well, it's 2 feet. I think you actually want the platform to be higher so that if you're seated, you can see over people's heads and still see performers. Right?
Yeah, I know, Frank, that's what it is at Lynch today, at Morocco, at VO.
It's lower. The gymnasium's lower than the platform.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, naturally lower by the actual dimension of the platform, but not gymnasium sunken from an elevation standpoint.
So
Maybe
the
I'm not understanding
gym,
what you're
so
saying.
so if the gym could be on the same level as the main floor, and then this platform would just be higher.
Oh, got it. I thought you were saying.
And if this platform was higher, then we'd need to find a way on this side to put in a ramp and some steps.
Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
And if we did that, that's fine. We could most certainly do that. And the only downside is it takes up space, but it also means that if you have whatever, a bass drum or or a piece of scenery or something you're trying to get on there, it's just a little bit more of a headache because you're either carrying it upstairs or you're pushing it up a very narrow ramp because we don't have a whole lot of space. So the notion was, oh, well, maybe you could just take stuff straight on and off. And so operationally, that might be a benefit. I don't think it's a earth-shattering situation, but it could help.
Geetha, and then
Mark,
Mark.
it help with grading. Maybe that would be good.
Geetha, you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question, Charlie. I guess goes back to this Frank just touched upon in terms of working with the landscape architect. And then just a while ago, you said the riverfront analysis done. So is the 500-year flood elevation is set? Is the elevations are going to be worked off of that? And who had performed the riverfront analysis? Was it Niche?
Yes, Niche.
Okay.
And we should be well out of the 500-year floodplain.
I see. So is that also connected to the Horn Pond?
Analysis?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So is it something that may be available just for us to see, I guess.
Well, I think that what Nish wanted to do was first have a preliminary conversation with Conservation Commission and get their input before they did anything further. So that's kind of the stage we're at. Is sort of an initial investigation of, you know, do they have questions? Do they have guidance? Is there things they would like to see done differently in advance of having a meeting with Conservation Commission?
Okay, so are they also doing the flow test by niche as well?
No, the flow test is by the plumbing engineer.
Okay, all right, I thought it was a slug test, some reason I thought it that way. Okay, so maybe I come back to the G's question. Since gym would be used by the public quite a lot, are there any bathrooms next to the gym? And what would be the way if gym is open to the public? How
So
would
the gym,
they enter?
the gym is right on the lobby, and
Yeah.
there's significant bathrooms right in the center of the lobby. So it's a very short walk. There's a ramp right now. So right now we have those stairs. We also have a ramp that goes down to this lower lobby. If we didn't have the stairs, then you would just go directly to the gym. But in either case, the bathrooms are right there. They're essentially adjacent to the gym. And they're also serve the cafeteria, of course.
Okay, okay. So they enter from the front side of the building, or is that how they would
Yes,
enter?
although there was an email sent at some point, I think, about the possibility of people using the fields during the weekends who might like to be able to come up and use a restroom. And again, that's completely up to the district and the town, and it's an operational question. But there's no reason, if the rest of the school was blocked off, that you couldn't have people enter from the rear and use the restrooms. At that point, I think they could either leave from the front or leave from the back. So you can get into the lobby from either side. But I think that for an event, most of the parking's in the front, right? So I think most people will be entering from the front, is my presumption.
Okay. All right, thanks, Charlie. I mean, I'll just hold out on the site plan layout for some other time, but I would have a question later on.
Hey, Mark, you have a question?
Yeah, so I think the learning areas look great, Charlie. I do have two questions. One is both of them are about that support area. So one thing is that the custodial, mechanical, electrical, they don't have access to the rest of the building right now. So you leave the building to re-enter. That may be fine, but if that's an issue, that might be something worth talking about.
No, I think that's a good call. The intent was that they'd be able to go from the back of house into the cafeteria, which we've done in other schools. But right now, the way it's shown, you can't really, it doesn't appear that you can do that. And at one point, I think we actually had a corridor, and the corridor seems to have magically disappeared. So that's a good catch. You need to be able to get from the back of house to the front of house.
The second thing is, since there's no true loading dock, it may be that when you talk to the landscape architect, since there's no loading dock, you're not going to have to back a trailer actually straight in to the dock because there is no dock.
Right.
So you're going to have to unload the trailer just off the back of the trailer.
Okay, right.
Unless there's a dock that is missing. But because of that, it means
we talked about a dock, and that didn't seem to be operationally something that was required.
Well, so then if you pull the trailer up, I don't know exactly whether it's acceptable to loop around the building and come out on Horn Pond Brook, but I can see an issue with that northwest parking lot when you try to do a full turnaround with a 53-foot truck, doing some damage to your parking layout. So if there's a way to make it a one-way, where you come in, you stop the truck, you unload right at that double door, and then you continue on your merry way, and then come out the other end of the site, then you would eliminate a truck turnaround.
You're saying go around the back?
Potentially, yeah, because if you have to turn a 53-foot truck or a trailer around, I think you're gonna lose a bunch of parking. So.
Yep.
Well, Jay made that point as well, and it's another fair point, and we'll definitely have them look at that this week. The north side is supposed to be supposed to be sort of bollarded off or gated off, and only being used by police,
Fire.
fire, and snowplows and
Got
people
it.
mowing the soccer fields because, you know, there's going to be kiddos back here and we sort of don't want much through traffic. So I kind of, my initial reaction is I'd love to keep any traffic out of the back if we possibly could, but I hear
Yeah.
you on turning radiuses.
Yep.
Okay, so the next floor, oh my gosh, it changed. The next floor is the second floor, and we still have first grade in the left-hand sort of box, and third and second grade in the right-hand box. This again is sort of lower elementary. We have connections again on each floor at the same location, right near the stair, which was a desired adjacency. We have the media center on the second floor, and we still have art on the second floor at the top of the monumental stair. However, we end up configuring that. I'm not sure it's going to be the way it looks now. So these sort of forms you're seeing are bays. And we started, so we have this kind of plinth on the bottom, which is the first floor, which is bigger because the classrooms are bigger. And we thought, well, what could we do on this upper two floors to sort of shape those floors and create kind of a zone within the classroom that could be a little sort of breakout space that could have a whiteboard or something and a small seating area. And we also started to think, well, if we want to try to sort of avoid Western light and gather Eastern light, we would want the bays to look this way. And we also started to think, well, maybe we should be trying to think about directing a little bit the views towards, on the north towards the woods, and on the south towards Hornbrook and the really pretty sort of wooded landscape, the sort of mid-distance landscape on the southeast corner of the site, which is so pretty, which is right now you can't see because it's behind the lynch, but it's going to be in full view. And it's a hill that goes up, you know, as you know, to the cemetery or whatever. So we're not sure we've quite got it yet, but we were interested in the idea of creating these bays, and that's kind of the intent there. But what it does is it kind of makes these classrooms a little bit more varied in terms of their environment. It creates a small group space. And it does start to do some stuff in terms of views and solar orientation. So we thought it was kind of interesting. Beyond that, the layout is pretty similar. What we now have, so we did a lot of programming around small group spaces for special ed. We have small group spaces that will allow for a teacher and 4 to 6 students distributed fairly consistently through the both of the upper floors to try to accommodate special education plus speech and language and a number of other programs. And we have a small kind of breakout space in the middle that can be furnished and used by students and teachers for small group and things like that. So these become these kind of very nice, very gracious kind of corridors that can be furnished to some degree, which is kind of neat. And there was a strong desire, which we sort of pushed against but didn't get anywhere, of having the cubbies in the corridors. So almost every grade level wanted cubbies in the corridors, not in their classrooms. And that just means we're grappling more with how do we locate cubbies, because it makes it a little harder to kind of create classrooms in these breakout spaces, not classrooms, but teaching and learning environments when you have a whole bunch of cubbies to manage, but that's okay. We will figure that out. And so that was kind of the intent with the second floor. And then
Mark
the
has a
third,
question.
sorry.
Mark, is your question on the second floor?
I'll wait until Charlie's done, then I'll.
Okay.
give
The
my
third
comment. Thanks.
floor is similar in that it's got grades 4 and 5. That's upper elementary. Those bays continue to have that same character. We still have the connections classroom in the same place, teacher planning on all 3 floors at the same place. So we're trying to create some kind of continuity vertically around the school and how it's organized. And of course, as we had before, STEAM is up here with across from the media center, and part of the media center is low, but part of it is high, so you can see into it. So there's some connectivity there, at least visually, between STEAM and library. And then we have this sort of green roof thing. And then you'll see in a minute when I show you the very, very conceptual massing diagrams, we're starting to wonder if we should consider some sort of a canopy, because we could put a whole bunch of PV panels on it if we wanted to. And that might make this less of a green roof and more of a covered roof. But you can get PVs on and put them up on brackets and actually have some dappled light that comes in. So we have to explore that idea. But we were thinking the problem with the green roof is you lose that many PV panels if you want to do solar. So, and the stairs, obviously, we have 3 fire stairs, one at the end, one in the middle, one at the far end. All of those are required by code. And then, of course, we have the monumental stair that only goes up 2 floors. But even up here, Jay, we will do those doors that close off the corridor. So you could, in theory, even use steam as a public space if you wish to. So that's kind of the upper floor. Mark, you had a question?
If you're going to show massing diagrams, I'll just wait until you finish that part of it.
You mean like what the heck does this look like?
Yep.
So the base is this plinth, as I said, that sits there, and we, because it's wider, we have these bays that can kind of sit on top of it. And that's why we thought we could kind of sculpt the upper floors a little bit, and kind of manipulate views and manipulate light a little bit and things like that. So that was the concept here. Materials are completely not necessarily figured out. Fenestration is not necessarily completely figured out, but you can see this, the idea that you could put some sort of a solar array up here if you had a canopy, and you still could have an outdoor space that was covered. And if this was easy and lightweight to build, it could be removed in the case of building up in the future. So that was the thought on that kind of end thing. And then, the idea is that this reads as kind of a plinth that reads as the sort of early learning, and then the upper floors are the elementary school sitting on top of that. And then obviously the library is cantilevered, and it creates a nice covered area for kids to wait for pickup and things like that. We could put benches along there, and that could be very pleasant. Obviously, we'll have covered area for entrance to the main building and into the cafeteria. And the same will happen over here. It's not quite showing up yet. So that was kind of the concept on the south. But again, this is really early days. And then on the rear, you end up with sort of the same idea, these kind of bays sitting on top of a box. The kind of knuckles in the middle. This one is not developed in the same way this one is yet. And then obviously the gym. And gym, we can get glazing around 3 sides, which is nice. And we're thinking about a few skylights above the entrances just to bring some light in from above. And obviously we think we'll end up with some kind of roof screen system. We certainly have rooftop mechanicals, and that's going to take away from future solar panels, depending on what we do. So that was kind of the concept there. So Mark, now that you've seen it, do you have questions?
Yeah. So I really like the idea of the bays. I am wondering, you, in the ground floor plan, you had developed this kind of language of these sort of skewed polygons as the sort of plan geometry of the building, like the stair on the east end and the service zone on the west end. And the bays, like currently, kind of speak a different language. Mm-hmm. And it's definitely, I know you guys are at the concept stage, but definitely might be worth seeing what kind of plan geometry at those bays is more consistently represented across the project.
Yeah.
It's also really exciting to see all of these areas where the geometry of the upper level gets smaller than the lower level. It feels like there's a real opportunity, though I understand there's also a cost associated with it, where you have these exposed roof areas that you can look down onto from upper levels. And in those areas, I encourage you to study whether there are ways that they can be made nice. If they're green roof, even if it's just an extensive green roof, or they're a ballasted roof. but something that's not just a membrane.
Yep.
Because to me, it just always looks like someone forgot. When you can look out and see a membrane roof from an interior space.
We had that conversation internally, and the fear with the green roof idea, the vegetated roof idea, is what was that there would be so many of them to maintain. It might drive.
Yep.
I mean, you have to bring in you basically have to bring somebody in once or twice a year to maintain these things. They'd have an awful lot of work to do if we sort of spread them out across. So I don't know if that makes sense, or whether, as you said, a ballasted roof makes more sense or something like that.
Yeah, and I know you can get decorative river rock and other things,
Right.
though, depending on the insurer, that can sometimes be a conversation.
Right.
For wind, but definitely worth keeping an eye on.
Yeah.
And I love the idea of that green canopy over. I think it really helps on the east side of the building to have.
This. Yeah.
And I think if that could be, like a translucent PV array, the idea that you could let light in, it could be a green space, but also a shaded outdoor space.
Right.
Would really expand the use of that outdoor space.
We certainly don't need the whole thing, but if we had a smaller space in the middle that was railed off or whatever that they could use for outdoor learning, that would be great.
Yeah.
Charlie, keeping cost in mind, is there a premium for all the bays?
Yes. There's always a premium for corners. There's always a premium for changes of materials and flashing. But the fact of the matter is, if we don't have these bays, we're still back of the front wall, right? So we still have the same issue to deal with in terms of a lot of the same issues to deal with in terms of constructability. So, an estimator is going to tell you that, yeah, you pay more for perimeter wall, right? So if you increase perimeter wall, you increase cost, and that's just kind of a reality. But I wouldn't say that this is a dramatic increase. I mean, we're talking about, if this were flat, instead of having, essentially this is the equivalent of flat. This is just a faceted wall. So really, the only thing we're talking about this additional is probably the sort of sidewall here, right, from a square foot point of view. So it's not super dramatic.
And why do we have to step back? Why not come straight
Because we
up?
don't need the square footage on the second two floors.
Be less expensive to put it in though, right?
No, well, first of all, the MSBA wouldn't let us. Second of all, we don't need it. And so because the K and pre-K classrooms are larger, they extend farther out, right?
Right.
Oh, Charlie, last comment about architectural kind of expression consistency is on the center bar where you have the 3 bays, you have the roof come out as an overhang, and on the east bay, you track the roof along the line of the bays. And I'd be interested to see which of those two approaches, whether a single approach for when there's a bay is more appropriate, or whether variety such as you're showing here is.
Yeah, we
is
talked
the way to
about
go.
that too, and we sort of couldn't decide, because if you ever did build an addition up there, then you'd have that overhang here, and then you'd have it up there, and then this would basically be building, right? And that might be okay. So we could just try that sort of roof going across here at 2 stories, and then assume that this in the future would just be a setback 3rd floor, maybe. But because if you decided in the future you wanted to have it look like this, you'd be taking the whole thing off, which I don't know if that's a good outcome or not. I mean, obviously in the back, we did do it on both sides, right?
Yep.
We were consistent there. So it's a little bit hard to know how to deal with it.
Heath has a question also for you.
Yes, Jay, I guess along the line before it looks great, no question about it. I guess Charlie just mentioned even the green roof may not be an option because of the maintenance. So having said that, I suppose, is there an intermediate form, instead of being a straight wall, instead of being this multiple bays, would there be a simple bay that would achieve both? Or is there an option to consider solar option along the panels so that at least, I guess Charlie mentioned we cannot add the space because MSBA won't allow. And then there is extra space that we cannot even use it as a green roof to get some LEED certification. And then
Well-
obviously, I mean, I do like the look of it, no question about it, but just if the cost doesn't shock us or something along the line, just wanted to say something.
So my only concern about the green roof down here is
Yeah.
just the maintenance of it and whether it's going to be a giant maintenance headache. If you put it in one place, then you send the people up there, the roof gardeners up there twice a year, they maintain it and you're done, or once a year. This is just a whole lot of
Right.
sort of small extended roof all over the place. And I would only just be concerned that the district would sort of find that to be a little much to have to manage.
Todd has a question also.
Yeah, the last two schools, we ended up putting up guardrails, safety rails after the fact. Is there going to be a parapet around the roof edge on this building?
There is not. We are meeting with Pete, and I know it's one of his concerns in another 10 days. And he has already mentioned that, and we'll take it up with him again. I mean, our theory is we would maintain OSHA setback standards everywhere, so you don't need a rail. So then the question is, would the district or DPW want a rail? And we're aware of the issues, so we won't, if everybody wants rails, we will not forget about it and you have to do it later. We know it's front and center as a topic. Our thought is that if we meet OSHA fall standards, we ought to be okay. And that's really, 10 feet off the roof edge, I believe. And also you can have tie down locations, right? So you can clip in as well when you're up there. But if we want rails, we'll put the rails in now. But I think rails are still a less expensive outcome than a parapet.
Is the intent that all mechanical equipment is in the two corrals up there?
I doubt it'll all be there. I imagine we'll have some over here on the gym as well. We have meetings coming up with mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and fire protection as well to talk about that. But my guess is we're going to have either one or two locations. We may have something in over service and something over gym.
I can imagine that there would be, exhaust fans and other types of fans on the roof that wouldn't be in those corrals, just kind of scattered from place to place.
Yeah, and if that's true, we have to work around them in terms of layout and in terms of, these are generic right now. This is not fully laid out.
Do you anticipate, Charlie, the DPW has to get up on the roof and shovel the snow for falling ice or snow, something like that?
Not sure they'd have to do that, I hope, but they certainly have to have access to the roof. And we like to run, so that's something else that doesn't show here. Most of our schools, we have a ladder, we try to always have a stair that goes all the way up, not just ladders, because it's just a better, safer way of accessing the roof. So we need to decide which stair makes the most sense to be taller. And that we haven't done, but you'll probably ultimately see one of these stairs sort of going higher so that we can get up there, The
west stair, right? Because isn't that close to the enclosure?
Well, it's hard to know. I mean, it's really for service, right? So I don't know which one makes the most sense. I mean, it could be the one in the middle, because then you can go both directions, which makes a whole lot of sense. It could be the end one because you could pull a service vehicle up there. It might not be over here just because you're not up on the high roof over here. So I think it's probably got to be one of, or it could be this stair.
Yeah, that's the one I was thinking because it.
Yeah.
I mean, you should be as close to your mechanicals as possible on the service area.
So if they're distributed, that's why I was thinking the middle.
I meant the service area entering the building with electric room.
Well, that's where a service vehicle might likely park, but they're going to end up having to walk somewhere with filters or whatever. They're going to have to
through
walk
the building.
Through the building. I mean, there's no good way of avoiding that, unfortunately.
Right. Chris Conway has a question also. Chris?
Thanks, Jay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Yeah, thanks for bringing up the roof access. That was very high on my list. you know, there's a lot of elevations, a lot of roof elevations. And I know there was just some discussion about potentially having a centralized stair, but I think there needs to be sort of an access map across the roof, because even with the roof, you know, if general access is through the center of the building, especially with these PV arrays, I believe that are shown on the roof, there needs to be full access to all of these roofs, preferably not through just one stair. So I would certainly love to see more detail on what the roof access is going to look like. And then additionally to that, what the equipment is going to look like that's going to be in these mechanical screens, and access to those. And I know you did mention that there would be some further discussion about fall protection. I'd like to jump on two things with that. You know, I think given the flat roof nature, I think something, whether, as Todd had mentioned, a parapet or full coverage with railings is going to be pretty needed. Clipping in is not really a reliable, usable method to work on a roof, especially when trying to navigate things like snow and having to navigate on that roof in snow, trying to clip into a cable that's buried in the snow. Additionally, with the skylights that you had mentioned, are those going to be in an elevation that they would not require skylight protection, fall protection to the skylights? Would they be sufficiently elevated off the roof that they would not require coverage, or would those need to be built with fall protection coverage on the glass?
I would think they could have curbs that were high enough that you could avoid that problem.
Just seems like that would be
Why
something
not?
that needs to be planned ahead, not,
Yeah.
you know, as far as I would think type of thing. Just one other thing I wanted to pass on, just on something I had noticed on the opposite face of the building. It looks like there's a decorative grate just to the right of the sign that says Lynch Elementary School. Is that like sort of it looks very similar to something that's at the high school. And I just wanted to pass on to the committee that we actually have a fair amount of trouble with that type of grate and snow and ice falling off of it. And occasionally to frequently through the winter have to block off the area underneath it because things fall that are pretty substantial in size. So I just wanted to, I don't know what that is, but it looks like what's on the right side of the main entrance to high school. And
Yeah, that's not dissimilar. I mean, it's a sun control device, right? So it's trying to control solar gain into that window.
Yeah, I just wanted to pass that on, that we do experience difficulties at the high school with ice and snow falling off that, and occasionally have to block off the area underneath because it can get somewhat significant.
Chris, does it help that that's at least in this view, a planted area rather than a pedestrian area?
I think it would. It's just if feel like that's an area that kids are going to run back and forth in, just looking at the way it's laid out right now. I mean,
yeah.
In reality, would they? I don't know. But like I said, we definitely, at the high school, it's not, you know, it's right on a walkway or right on a concrete pad. So it definitely is subject to some more issues. So that might be a good call there. I just don't know what the traffic across that grassy area would look like. And then if you don't mind, I just had one more question on the first floor. On the back of the gym, is that set of double doors ground level or is it elevated? It was on the first floor plan view.
This?
Yeah, at the back of the gym.
Oh, way back there?
Yeah, there's a set of double doors. Just trying to think of some way. I want to make sure that we have some way to be able to get significant like lifting equipment, like a scissor lift, things like that into that space. And it does not look like that would be very possible through the main lobby.
Well, theoretically, a scissor lift ought to be able to go up and down a accessible ramp. So if we did that, we don't have to do this configuration, but if we did it, I think you can get a lift down a ramp.
Again, I'd like to plan for that because we, you know, as opposed to think about it, because we do need to make sure that we can get lifting equipment into that gym without, extraordinary measures.
Yeah, well, and then yes, there are doors. There'll be more doors than this. This is not showing adequate means of egress right now. I don't think this is code compliant, but there are paved. The entire perimeter of this is paved, so I think there'd be multiple ways in and out with a lift from the outdoors as well.
Good. I'm sure I'll have more questions, but I just had a few that I was jotting down. Thank you.
Mark, do you still have a question?
Yeah, I do. I had two more things. And since Chris is on, he may have an answer to it. I do not know if the town has a window washing protocol, but just something to be mindful of with the steps in the roof and access from above and access from below, depending on how it's planned to be done, if it is planned to be done, but having provisions for that, I think probably makes sense, and it can be tricky with the bays and the overhanging roof. So that's one. And the second is on the roof, when you have your conversations with the MEP, the difference between a well-planned roof and a not well-planned roof with PV can be a significant one in terms of the output of the array on the roof. So thinking about where the vent stacks are for the water closets and in the exhaust fan for the kitchen and all of those other miscellaneous little bits and bobs that Todd talked about, planning those ahead of time and planning them in ways that allow you to maximize the blocks of PV really has a huge effect on the effectiveness of that array. So just something to add to the list.
Okay. Anyone else, or can we move on?
I'm done.
You done, Charlie?
Building envelope be solarized too, just curious, with the windows, with the new technology ahead of us.
Can you repeat that, Keitha?
I don't know, I'm just asking Jay, that the solar is revolving, as the years ahead of us. Could the envelope, like window panels and stuff like that, could they be solarized in looking ahead in the future?
Yeah,
I mean, could the lynch be planned that way as opposed to just the panels on top of the roof?
Very expensive right now.
Yeah, that was gonna be my reaction. That makes our bays seem pale in comparison, I expect.
Okay.
let's try to move on. We spent a lot of time on this. The next item is C, which is project delivery method. We're going to turn that over to Vivian. But Charlie, I have a question first. I've been going back and forth with this all day. I just don't understand. The cost estimators need to know this up front in order to do the estimate, or they can't. It's not just a matter of, you would think it's just overhead. I'm in my head as an estimator. I'm trying to see what would change on the delivery method. Electrical, everything stays the same.
They would tell, I'm not the estimator. I think they would appreciate the courtesy of knowing. I think that they might go back and change unit prices if they found out later for certain things. It is true that that at the most basic level, it is just about general conditions, overhead, and profit and fee. Those are the things where you see the CM at risk premium the most. However, there are certain trades that sub-trade, non-filed sub-bid sub-trades, the half of the job that goes to the GC or the CM, where they may view it that they want to adjust their unit costing because they think it's a trade where it's a union trade, for instance. So most of the GCs are open shop, and most of the CMs are signatory to the unions. So I think there's the possibility that they'd have to adjust. It doesn't mean they can't go back through and do that. It's just a headache for them. But
I just have, I hate pushing this on everyone with the, but let's see how the questions go with Vivian's presentation.
Right.
Vivian,
Thank
ready?
you, Jay. But with that question kind of bouncing off of it, there is the potential to provide both options cost estimate on both delivery methods. And maybe what we can do is, Charlie, if you wouldn't mind checking with your cost estimator, Andy and I can check with ours, and that way maybe be able to provide a cost estimate on both delivery methods and allowing the EFPBC to have both before a decision is rendered.
So then there's one other thing, Jay, that's just a matter of kind of logistics and timing. A lot of the material that goes into the schematic design package is going to be developed around cost. So ideally, you're starting on that as early as you can. I think the town and the district have, and the OPM have a fairly heavy lift putting all that together. So the more time there is to do that, the easier it is on everybody. It's a little less of a fire drill. And we do also need to write supporting text and the like, as well as schedules around that are directly impacted by the decision. So it doesn't mean you can't do it at the last minute. It's just more of a headache to do it at the last minute, and you have more potential for making mistakes and the like.
Right.
And,
Well, we'll
and
get started.
therefore, can I just interject quickly, Jay? Therefore, based on what Charlie said, to give everybody some context with the timeline, it sounds as though Charlie and Tappe and Hill would really prefer we make a decision on project delivery method by July 25th, which would be our next meeting, but really hopefully no later than August 8th, that we might make that decision that late as well. Is that fair?
Yes,
Okay.
that'd be awesome.
I wanted to give those on the call tonight just a little bit of context, because we're going to continue to have some conversation tonight about project delivery method, but it's good to have an idea about where the hard stop is, because we will have to make a decision. Thank
Right.
you.
All right, Vivian.
All right. Hello, everybody. I will be sharing my screen, and I hope everyone can see this. It's just a 2-slide deck, so I'll try to keep it simple and easy for tonight. And just to remind everybody that based off of the information that was already shared, this is in an effort to continue the discussion and to continue the conversations related to the delivery method. We are not, as Chris alluded to, we are not asking for a decision to be made today, but we wanted to give you a little bit further understanding and conversations regarding Chapter 149. So here we've tried to outline some of the advantages as well as some of the disadvantages for selecting Chapter 149, which is known as CM at risk, or CM. Some of the advantages would be that we can have an early package on steel, given the fact that we would have 100% construction documents ready and be completed, as well as an early package on foundation and curtain wall. We can also have an early package on the demolition and the abatement of the existing building, as well as potentially have some pre-ordering of long lead items, if not trade bids. This one we've been going back and forth a few times with Hill and Tappe in understanding and maybe kind of giving it some context of what would be some of the pre-ordered long lead items. Definitely steel would be one of them, and potentially curtain wall. We're not necessarily convinced that some of the long lead items pertaining to electrical as well as HVAC might be worthwhile unless we try to do it as a owner furnished item. So there's still some nuances that we would have to understand and develop. The cost estimate would be performed by the CM once contract is finalized, as well as they would do a constructability review on drawings and specs. The CM would provide input on design, schedule, logistics plans, phasing, as well as cost and process. Hill would also be doing a constructability review regardless whether you select a CM or a general contractor, just to help give another set of eyes and review. The GMP, or the guaranteed maximum price, can be established as early as a 60% construction documents are developed, and this would shift the risk over to the construction manager. They would also have increased field presence and staffing, but this will also increase the cost for the general conditions. Some of the disadvantages that we've been noticing, on average, the construction manager is coming in about 8 to 10% more. And based on the option that was selected as N5 at the PSR phase, this translates to about 5 million to 6.1 million more for a CM at risk based off of the 61.5 million cost estimate. We also would have a little bit less control, limited control on holds and allowances, and won't be able to take full advantage of the competitive bidding. Brian, I do see that you have your hand raised. If you wouldn't mind, I'd like to go on to the next slide before we take any questions, or is it one that pertains to these at the moment?
It pertains to this
Sure.
disadvantage bullet point. Just what's the methodology for ascertaining 8 to 10% more, right? Because every project either has one approach or the other. So how do you do that comparison?
We've definitely asked the cost estimators and looked at MSBA's website as well. And if you look, they have all reported on average about 8 to 10% more for a CM versus a general contractor.
And that ends up showing up in sort of per square foot figures broadly across many projects too?
Yes.
Okay.
And if we just take at the PSR phase estimate, the option that was selected at 61 came in at 61.5 million. Just based off of that, doing a really high level 8% and a 10%, we're anticipating a 5 million to a 6.1 million.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Advancing to the second slide. We are currently projecting a 20-month construction duration for this project. And based off of the latest cost estimate, the general conditions per month were about 120,000. General requirements per month were based on the latest cost estimate were right under 32,000. And the cost for the modulars were 25,500. So taking that, we multiplied it by 3 months so that, to give you a little bit of context, that if 20 months is what we're anticipating, if there's a delay in the project of 3 months or 6 months, what would that do for our cost? And trying to help decipher if going a general contractor or a CMR, weighing out the options on which avenue to pursue for the delivery method if there is a potential delay for the project. If we were utilizing a general contractor, which would be 149, we wouldn't have any general conditions, but we would definitely have general requirements, multiplying it by 3 months of the 31,711, you would receive, you would get 95,000. For the modular cost, it's close to 77,000. We also anticipated a 10% unforeseen just in case, and cost of delay for 3 months would be under 200,000. Whereas comparatively with a construction manager, since we would have to add general conditions, we're a little over 500,000. This is in addition to the additional 8 to 10%. For a 6-month delay, we would reach a little under 400,000 or over $1 million of delay for a 6-month duration. Mark, I see you have your hand raised. Did I see that incorrectly?
Yeah, when you're ready, Vivian, I'm happy to ask my questions, but I didn't want to.
I only had 2 slides for today.
Okay.
Help.
Okay, so going the other direction for the CMR or CMAR, do early packages provide any schedule benefit that would offset some of those cost increases for this specific project, or do we not see that as a significant benefit?
We are seeing that we are hearing in the industry that there are some long lead items. But some of the long lead items might be potentially towards the steel.
Yep.
If there's an opportunity to maybe advance the steel, that would be great. We're not necessarily at this stage seeing it being a critical path, critical schedule item. We are projecting already a 20-month duration for construction on average for a project this size. We usually anticipate 18 months, but given the fact that, you know, the climate and some delays, we've already extended it to 20 months. If the project was to go a little bit further and it was delayed some more for whatever reason, that's what led to the second slide, putting together if it was delayed by 3 months or 6 months, what would the cost
Right.
implications mean in opening the school as well as, you know, financially?
Okay, and second quick question, is there a difference in how we would manage alternates for these two approaches to the project delivery?
I know for a general contractor during the bid time is when you would put in for alternates, and based on the pricing, you would either accept it or reject it the day of the bid, kind of include it. Whereas for alternates in a CMR, it's a little bit similar but different. Andy, if you want to kind of chime in as well.
You have to put them in order and you have to accept them in the order that was listed. So
That's for a general contractor. For a
Yep.
chapter 149, you definitely have to put them in order of which one is preferred. And once you receive the price for it, you would accept them in that order. But for a CMR,
on the file subbid, it's the same method. If you have some alternates for the file subbid, you still have to bid it out and, you know, do the same order for example, if there's certain thing that you want for electrical or mechanical, and you still have to list it out in at the same bidding for the file subs.
I think, Mark, to answer another way to answer it, about 50% of the job, give or take, really wild number, but is going to be filed sub bids. The other 50% is
Yep.
going to be a contractor. The 50% that's a contractor, if it's a CM, you have a lot more flexibility because they'll do their GMP after the filed sub bids come in. They can manipulate numbers after that in terms of scope, their scope.
Yep.
But in either case, anything that's a filed sub bid. So if you say we want 2 less rooftop units, then it doesn't matter what the delivery method is because that's a mechanical contractor, right? So you know you have to do an add alternate, and it has to be. So there is more flexibility. If it's just a normal design bid build, you have zilcho. You have zero flexibility. You have some flexibility with CMs, but it's still only about half the job, half the value of the job.
Okay, thanks.
We have Todd, Geetha, and Chris and Brian. So Todd, you want to start off with a question?
Yeah, mine's quick. For long lead items, I've got a project I'm noticing, electrical transformers with lead times of up to 30 to 50 weeks. So there might be some of that. I don't know, Jay, if you're seeing that on electrical.
No, we commented earlier that, you know, switchgears, it's 60 weeks right now. Transformers are up there too. The problem is, Todd, you won't find too many electricians interested in doing a project that items like the gear is already pre-ordered and they have to take ownership on.
right,
so
since it is
that's
a
a
filed
tough-
bidder.
Yeah, it's not like steel where you're buying a package. You know, someone's going through and same with your mechanical equipment, pre-purchasing it and then asking the contractor to take ownership of those items that they were bought correctly. That's a tough one, but it's a good question.
Yeah, since this is the electrical units fall under the filed subbidders, regardless of which delivery method you select, it would still be a filed subbidder. And for that, it would be extremely difficult to get a construction manager to pre-purchase some of the longer lead items pertaining to the HVAC mechanical systems, as well as the electrical, like the switch gear, for example. and have the subcontractor own it.
The only thing a CM can do a little bit is try to manage the process, because they're working as a project advocate. They see themselves working on behalf of the owner. So they can, you may get a little benefit from them trying to ride herd over subs who need to go ahead and release early and get going. A normal design bid builder is not going to do that particularly. They're not particularly inclined to kind of mix it up with their subs. So there's some potential for additional management that could help around the margins with a CM.
But that's also, I appreciate that comment, Charlie, but it also kind of allows for us to have interaction and involvement with the general contractor, and where we have managed many opportunities and many projects where we've seen instances where we have potential delays or long lead items, and just putting pressure on the general contractor to procure those a little bit sooner than original, knowing that it's in the best interest of the project, not just for the owner, for them as well. Geeta, you had your hand raised.
Yes, Vivian. So I guess my question is, the early package in the first slide that you had, Vivian, why are we just linking it with the project delivery method? For example, the demo and the abatement, could that be as a chapter 149A, but it's a separate construction package? I guess the concern here is with the things happening around, is just the long lead items. Then Jay just mentioned no electrician want to use the transformer and whatnot. But if there's a concern with the steel and the abatements and the site prep, instead of linking it with the project delivery method, why can't it be with the conventional design bid build and as a as a separate package going ahead of the time?
So we can definitely do that with the demolition and the abatement of the existing building. I don't think that it would be feasible to do it with the steel and the foundation or the others. We can definitely.
The structural steel submittal could be asked. No?
I'm sorry?
Could the structural steel submittal could be asked as an early, I don't want to use the word early, as a separate
package?
Yeah.
Then why wouldn't you just do it with the regular general contractor?
No, I guess there's a concern that you need long lead to get steel. Is that the concern, one of the concern right now?
Yes.
In other words,
And this is the same thing that Jay said about buying switchgear early. No GC wants to be involved in a project where they weren't responsible for the steel. There's too much coordination. You can't have the steel get erected in isolation and then do the rest of the project separately. I just think that's the absolute.
Every trade is dealing with the steel.
Disaster.
Right,
Yeah.
Charlie. Every trade is dealing with the steel afterwards, from curtain walls to, roofing. Everyone has to deal back with it. And if that GC was done and walked away, there'd be no onus on that portion of the job.
Correct. There'd be no coordination.
remind me, Jay, at VO, did we have two separate GC for site prep and the construction?
We did, and that's what we were talking about here earlier, is the abatement and taking down the building and turning over a green site as one bid, and then building the building as a separate bid, which is doable on this project probably.
Yeah.
But we're not at that point yet. We need to get through this, but that is an option, Geeta. It is an option.
So if that's an option, then could we have a less of a decision that we need to make with respect to the project delivery method? Because would you take that angle? That's the angle I'm trying to drive. In other words, if we kind of also look at the separate construction package that we can deal with, then it would put a less of a stress on the delivery method. Maybe that's the
No,
a different way to look at it, Geeta, is that the demolition and the abatement of the existing building could be a completely separate project all on its own. And the contractor could come in, abate and demo the existing building, bring it to a green, clean site and then move away. And then it would come, then we would be able to have a completely different, either a CM or a general contractor come in and build the building. You don't have to necessarily link both of them. You can, it be, you could have it under one umbrella and have one GC or CM, again, regardless of which delivery method you select, come in, abate, demo the existing building, and then start with the foundation and the steel and all of the other trades. Or you can break it out into two. Regardless of the delivery method, you can do that. And that is an option that we have entertained, and we're still looking at having further conversations to see if it is worthwhile for this project based on the schedule and the timing.
But just
That
to answer
really
to answer that question further, the demolition, abatement and demolition is not going to expedite
Right.
the project dramatically, because the fact is that they could do that while the building was being built. The steel would, but foundations and steel would, but the demolition won't in this particular case, because we don't have to remove the building to start work. And that could be just going on in parallel with new construction.
And it could actually cost more money. I mean, I like the idea of doing that, but it could be more expensive to put out two packages.
Well, it will be, because you're paying for mobilization twice,
Right.
you're paying for general conditions twice. You're absolutely going to pay a premium for that, no doubt.
Yeah.
I don't know what it would be, but you would.
Right.
No question. And you still have the issue of, the first people can't get out of the way and the second people show up and say, why are the first people? I mean, there are some handoff risks and the like as well.
What is the main driving risk would decide between the two delivery method? In other words, yes, the cost is a factor, but is that the long lead items is driving the delivery method for this site, for this construction?
Well, I think CM gives you generally it gives you a better choice of firms to select from, because there's more of them out there than there are general bidders. And it gives you the fact that they will do pre-construction management to some degree. So they are involved in the pre-construction process, which can be helpful in terms of setting the job up for success. They have a lot more flexibility about these early packages. And generally, we see the quality is considerably better with a CM. The real differentiator here is cost. It's just clear that a CM, if they cost the same thing, anybody would pick CM in a minute because it's a better process, but it's a significant difference in cost. Although what that is of course different from project to project and all that, because there is the possibility of getting money returned, which you'll get a lot more change orders with the design bid builder than you will with a CM at risk, because they sort of bake in a lot of those changes into their GMP.
But with that, I'm not.
So the GMPs are higher.
Right, the GMP is significantly higher, 8 to 10%. I'm not certain that we will get change orders that equate to an 8 to 10%. Typically on our projects, we've seen an average of 2.5 to 3% of change orders for a brand new build.
We really, for our next meeting, need to have I know we're running late, we need to have a timeline showing how each one would go, because if it did go design bid build, we may have to look at holding it off. Why would we be in modulars for 3/4 of the school year, maybe in renting those? It might be a June start, awarded in a June start instead. But it's something to talk about afterwards. I think we got to move on to Chris. You had a question?
But if you do
I
a
did.
June
Thank you,
start,
Jay.
you can't deliver the project.
Might not deliver anyways.
Well, I mean, it may not be, who knows, but I'm just saying, I think if you push it off till a June start, I don't think there's any chance of getting in the following August.
It almost means that we have no option than a CM at risk then, because the only thing we're gaining is to start it early. We need to see a timeline showing a CM at risk would be starting procuring at what time? In November? When would they be starting to get something done.
Well, we talked about an early site package being available probably in sort of late summer after permitting, if permitting was in the spring.
Right, which we could
early
do
summer.
either way. We could do an early site package.
And then steel we usually release those early structural packages at 60% MSBA CDs.
Which would be when?
Which in this case, I can't remember what the schedule said, but my guess is it's something wild guess, September, October. No, that's no earlier because we're bidding by November, by early November. So it's probably September or something, or August. I can't remember what the schedule said.
I think it was close.
I mean, that's been the typical routine: is you do early site based on DDs, you do foundations and structure based on 60% CDs,
and design bid build. We would not have a package out until the first of the year for a complete bid.
Well, I think our complete bid idea would be the same for both, which would be sort of November. Because I think in either case, we'd be shooting for that as 100%.
Right. So if we're anticipating a November bid and a January start.
All right. Chris, you had a question?
Yeah. So I guess I have several thoughts. Just for everybody's context, VO was 14 months from groundbreaking until substantial completion. Smaller project than Lynch. And that does not include that early site package that Gita and others have discussed. So we did have an early package to abate the old building, tear it down, and create a greenfield site. So with a truly blank slate, we were 14 months. Busy, very busy there at the end, trying to get it done before school. So Mark asked a question quite a while ago, and I agree with the comments about, in this particular instance, there doesn't seem to be a lot of schedule acceleration for Lynch with the separate project, just given how much could sort of happen concurrently. In other words, the early package of VO was so essential because the new building was being built basically on top of the existing, and that's not the case here. So not quite an apples to apples comparison. Mark had asked a question, though, a while ago of Vivian, and I want to be sure I heard his question right, because if I did, I'm not sure we quite got an answer to it, Vivian. And it was about, are there some offsets to the cost of the CM? And I thought he was asking about, savings associated with the early bid packages. And it seems to me, maybe it's unfair for me to think of it in such an elementary way, but surely if there is a substantial amount of work that we're able to bid, that a CM is able to secure, let's say 2, 3, 4 months earlier than a GC, there's some real savings there because every month that goes by, there is some cost of escalation, right? So I'm assuming there is some modest offset. And then with respect to, and this was just, you were talking earlier about your E&O, typically 2 to 3%, or you want to fold change orders into that, of course. I think in my mind, what I'm beginning to recognize is there's a difference between project cost versus project budget. Certainly one can't go above the other, but there will be a budget for the project. There will also be a cost. And I wonder, Vivian, does it not make sense if the CM at risk premium, as you've described it, is what it is because it sort of absorbs a lot of those changes that we would otherwise see? Does it not make sense to kind of compare that to the design bid build number with that additional 2 to 3% E&O thrown in? So what you're really looking is at more at the end of the day, like a net comparison of the two. Does that make sense? In other words, I want to be sure that your design bid build number, if that's assuming no change orders, no errors and omissions, but we always know that will happen, should we not factor that in? And then that delta becomes a little smaller. Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yeah, it does. But then it means that you're taking the 61.5 million that we option N5 at the PSR phase. You're either adding a 8 to 10% more premium for a CM, or you're adding, let's even, increase it to a 4%. for change orders for a GC. Typically, we've seen on average 2.5% to 3%, but let's, for just the sake of comparison, let's even anticipate a little higher and make it a 4%. And it's still under the 8 to 10%.
Yeah, but, and again, this is tough because we're talking a lot about construction costs and we don't yet know project costs, but project costs will include contingencies. That there'll be an owner's contingency, a design contingency, construction contingency that would absorb a lot of those change orders. So, and it's still on the agenda tonight, when we talk about Winchester High School, we still have sort of nitpick items that we're still dealing with, and we're able to do it because we have project budget still available. So I just want to be sure we're being clear. Are we talking about project cost or project budget? I think we need to be clear about that.
So when it comes to the GC and there's change orders, we would anticipate it in the project budget. But where it's for the CM, the average incremental cost for a CM over a GC is part of the project cost. So that would translate to construction dollars. So if in your overall project budget, you have a line item for GC, you would have slightly higher for a CM versus a general contractor.
But can I just ask why? So we're sort of speaking about the budget in a way that it's like we're going to design whatever we design, and then we'll get market feedback on what the cost is, and that will be what it will be. But isn't one of the major benefits of the CM at risk model that we get some of that market feedback earlier, so that we could say, for example, just pick a budget that we're going to manage to, and then make value engineering decisions with our construction manager accordingly? Isn't that one of the major benefits of that whole delivery model?
It is in principle. However, in the public procurement, where you have half of the job becoming a filed subbidder, it changes it.
My experience is you're gonna spend the entire project budget that's approved by the MSBA. There's not going to be any money coming back. So any savings that could come out of the CM at risk might be helpful for cost overruns elsewhere in the budget, but we're not going to see any kind of, I don't think, and maybe Vivian, you have experience elsewhere where that's not the case, but why would they not do the guaranteed maximum price? Why would any contractor not take it to that amount?
And it also depends on when we're signing the GMP. If we're signing the GMP at 60%, I mean, our advice would be, if you do move forward with a 149A delivery method, that you would secure the GMP as quickly as possible. If the start of construction is January, that before they are mobilized, by the time they're mobilized, you already have a finalized GMP.
Wait, you can't, because you don't have the filed subbids.
You would.
You can't get a final GMP until you've opened the filed subbids.
But by January, if they're scheduled to mobilize, you would already have the filed subbidders.
Well, right, but the GMP would have to include them.
Correct.
Okay.
That was the answer that I was trying to, based on involved in the high school, Vivian, until the GMP is being established, CM at risk, they're kind of floating. So that's sort of, I was trying to explain, until we establish GMP, we are kind of on the limbo. That's what I wanted to say.
Right.
Yeah, so 61.5 is a fake number,
So Vivian, can I just circle back to my question? Because I want to be sure, looking at that first bullet under disadvantages. So what I'm hearing is, on average, 8 to 10% more for CM at risk. But I thought as a part of that discussion, someone was saying, of course, with a GC, you're going to have 2 to 3% change orders or errors and omissions. But just to be clear, because that would be typically absorbed in any number of contingencies, what you're saying is the actual net impact on the project budget would still be 8 to 10% greater, right?
Or CM, yes.
Yes, for CM at risk. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Because that 2 to 3% is actually already accounted for.
Yes,
Okay.
in the contingency lines.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to be sure I was understanding that. Thank you.
Hey, we have Brian and Mark still. Brian, are you set or you have another
Yeah,
question?
I'll be real fast, but I guess the one just thought on my mind is that if we get to 100% construction documents before we get market feedback on what weird items are having strange supply chain situations, I feel like we're inevitably going to have some surprises on that front, which maybe could be avoided if we had feedback earlier. But I guess my fundamental question, and I know there's a bunch of restrictions placed on the CM at risk model because it's a public procurement, but like, when would they join the team and start influencing subsequent decisions that we're collectively making? At 60% construction documents, would we bid it at 60% and they'd actually join when we're like 80% of the way there? Or like, when would the construction manager at risk
You'd want
actually join our
them
team?
on by design development at the latest.
Yep.
Okay, so when, in terms of time versus our current timeline, would they join us?
Well, if we would be starting design development in January of next year in theory. And so if you follow the model of a lot of other communities who use CMs, you'd be procuring them this fall. And you can actually get them going with a fairly limited allowance for a kind of limited pre-construction fee. That's not a lot usually to get involved and get started even before you get to your vote. So if you're going to take full advantage of that pre-construction, ultimately of the pre-construction, then you would get them on as soon as you could.
So how can we get them going before the vote, Charlie? We can't
Well,
have somebody on board.
you'd take a modest amount of money out of the feasibility schematic budget and just to get them mobilized.
So
a lot of communities do that. So it wouldn't be a lot. It would be, you'd say, oh, we have $40,000 kicking around and we'd like to spend that on you guys before the vote to get mobilized, to look at the documents, et cetera, et cetera.
So if we were going to do that, we would have to take that to, where are we now? We're in the summer. We'd have to take that to fall town meeting to reappropriate those funds, because it's that same issue that we have of the schematic design money. The appropriation language was for schematic design only. So if we were going to use it.
I know other communities have had no problem doing this, but you may have different language. Other communities have just taken money out of the schematic design budget.
Yeah.
Because it's not a construction, it's just.
No, I know.
Consulting.
It's just like it's just moving you into design development. We would need to do that as well.
Oh, well, that's a different conversation we'll figure out later, but if that made any sense. But no, if you did it with a CM, in theory, all you're doing is paying basically consulting fees for pre-construction services. But then if it passed, you could deploy them in earnest, right? In design development. But that would be, if you did it that way, that would be my suggestion.
So the point I just want to sort of mull over a little bit is that we've heard that the pool of participants would be higher skill and we can expect a higher quality final product at CM at risk, but except it's more expensive. But if we're bringing them on board so early that the building has, substantial design decisions left, which are going to weigh in on the costs, and they're on our team and available to help us value engineer and manage to a budget, I don't see why it's a fact that they'll be 8 to 10% more expensive, because by definition, if we get them on that early and they're helping make design decisions that influence the cost and we manage to a budget that we have overall concluded is the budget that makes sense, I don't see why there would be a price difference. We might end up with a slightly different design, but at the same time, I think we're hearing we'd end up with a slightly higher quality building.
I think it would be really hard to predict that we could somehow VE 10, the equivalent of 10% out of a building.
Yeah, that's true.
There's just not that much VEing you can do in a school.
Yeah, and when you're working with a CM, you're doing just what you said, is you're designing to that budget. When you put it out to design bid build, you have the competition. So the numbers tend to come in, they're being more competitive. So,
I
because
mean,
they have.
it isn't as if they just give the job to their buddy. I mean, it is open book and you require them to bid to at least 3 or more bidders. So you do know who they're bidding to on the one hand. On the other hand, it's their bidders. So it isn't open to the world, right?
And there'll still be some price competition at the outset when you're bidding for the construction manager, because it's not like you'll just be going to one.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a lot. They'll give you a value for fee.
Right.
And I believe they'll give you a value for general conditions. And there can be a significant difference between proposers on that. So those kind of overhead costs they give you if you ask them for it, and everybody does ask them for it, but that's all you get to pick in terms of, I mean, that's the only place you can impact cost. And it can be, we've seen it be over $1 million delta between 2 different firms, but it's still, that's all it is that sort of overhead stuff.
And it's the general conditions based on, on a monthly basis, where you would have for a CM versus you wouldn't have for a GC. And it can be substantial. For 3 months, you're just, at the 120,000, you're already at 360. For 6 months, you're, 720.
Well,
if there's a delay.
A design bid builder has general conditions as well. It's just in their bid. It's not broken out. Everybody has general conditions. They have to.
May I ask a quick question, Jay? I remember we went back to MSBA data and sort of prepared a table looking at, the 5 years back, what are the trend in the schools and what was the CM at risk and the design bid build, and then came up with there was a big table put together and whatnot. So that sort of, we were able to see it in front of us. Having said that, what are the schools under MSBA study of where we are and what type of decisions that other communities making? Just curious, could we know that?
Currently, some of the projects that we're working on, I know that Andy is working on with Swampscott, and they had a similar conversation because they are a fairly larger project for a consolidated elementary school in town. And the decision had been rendered to go general contractor, 149. Currently in Concord, similarly, they decided to go chapter 149. Watertown, an adjacent neighborhood, has done all 3 of the elementary schools as chapter 149, as well as moving forward with the high school as 149. Newton, another very close vicinity town, is working with MSBA and non-MSBA projects of elementary schools, and they're all pursuing 149. The general contractor.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the ones that I'm fully aware of.
Yeah, not just Hill International, just across MSBA, just curious, anyway.
And I mean, Andy has utilized the MSBA website as well as all of the reporting that they've done for the various projects, and whether they've gone CM at risk or general contractor. And predominantly, I don't want to speak for Andy, but predominantly majority of them do utilize a chapter 149 design bid build process. Andy, you could speak to it too. Like I said, I don't want to speak for you.
Sorry, guys. Thank you.
We have Brian and Chris and Mark, and then we should try to move on. We get next week, next meeting to hit this again. Chris,
I'm done.
Okay.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Brian. Chris?
Yeah, I in the interest of time, the suggestion I was going to have is I think it's been a really good discussion, as well as at previous meetings. I think Jay would be perhaps helpful if members have questions specifically about this issue, about one delivery method or the other or both. If they could send those questions to you, you could collect them. You could give everybody a hard stop. I don't know when that would be. Maybe it's Friday or something, or Thursday. And you can sort of pull those together, send them off to Charlie and Vivian. and let them noodle on it so that when we reconvene, they have our project team has the benefit of getting a few more questions in advance. They're sort of prepared to address the questions. We can have another fulsome conversation before we're in a position where you have to make a decision.
Absolutely. And I love that suggestion. That way it would also help us kind of make sure that we're addressing some of the questions thoroughly and thoughtfully. And in the next presentation, as we had said, we are not asking for a vote tonight. We're just more trying to continue the conversation and help get all of the answers to the committee. When it is time for a vote, they can make an educated decision.
Yeah.
I'm good with that. And I think if we can have them by the end of the day on Friday, if that's safe enough, it gives me the weekend and I'll get it to Vivian and Charlie by Monday, sometime Monday.
Perfect.
If that's okay with everyone.
Mark, I know you have your hand raised and I apologize if you didn't get an opportunity to ask.
Oh, no, it's just a quick thing. If costs were the only factor, for me, the decision is simple because we get more school. If we have the same budget, we get more school with the GC versus CM at risk. That's what I'm hearing. And if we get a better school for the same amount of money, that seems like an easy decision. So to reiterate Jay's point, understanding what the schedule implications are for the opening of the school complete is very important, because if there is a benefit to CM at risk from a schedule standpoint, then it feels like there's a discussion to be had. But if there isn't any appreciable benefit for a CM at risk, I don't see how we would do anything other than a GC, because we're going to get more school for the same amount of money.
With that, we could definitely establish a little bit more of not a higher level schedule and help to define it better for next presentation. But just as a quick answer, I mean, even if we've already allotted for a 20-month duration for the project, regardless of what delivery method. If the project extends beyond 20 months, I think, regardless of which delivery method you're going to select, they're still going to come back to you and say there's a delay. If there's going to be a delay, there's going to be a delay.
Yeah, I just want to know, because delays you can't predict. So I'm just trying to understand, is there actually a difference in the start date, opening day for Lynch, CM at risk versus GC? And if there's not, it seems like an easier decision.
Okay, so that's a great takeaway that we could work on for next presentation, to look at a higher level, milestone schedule for both delivery methods.
Great. Okay. Can we move on to authorizations for payment? Did everyone get a chance to read what was sent out earlier?
I would move as presented.
Okay, that would be for
second.
That includes a line item to award the bathroom accessories, I believe, Meg, right?
That's correct, at the high school.
Yep, for automated solutions for 14,937.
Correct.
So, so Brian, your movement is for the whole, the TAP A, Welch, and for the spending authorization?
It was actually me, but Brian can have it.
Oh, I'm sorry, Frank. I didn't see it. Okay.
I second Frank's motion.
All right, thank you, Brian. All right, we'll get a roll call on that. So we have a Frank. Lisa? Is she still?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm just.
Todd?
Aye.
Geetha?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
And Mark?
Aye.
All right, so the authorization, the whole sheet is passed. Thank you. And high school updates. I don't think we have any ready, but
we have one, Jay. We've got Meg got some numbers back for the accessories installation.
We just
We
approved
just
that, Chris.
approved.
Oh, well, that, wait a minute. So, all right,
It's
then
like
I'm
14,000 and change.
Yeah.
I'm confused. then.
After we thought it was someone else was the low bidder, but there was actually a better number out when Meg put them both together. So that's what she put on the letter I sent out.
Oh, okay. So I thought Automation Solutions was for a different thing, because I thought we were going with a different contractor. So does that include, forgive me, can I just ask a clarification then? So that includes wall openings, finishes and everything?
Yes, that's what they say.
Okay,
There's backup at the end, Chris.
what's that?
There's backup at after the
What was
after the
sent out.
request. Yeah.
Yeah, and I had Jennifer Littlefield look it over, so she feels comfortable with it as well.
Okay. So then related to this, so that's the 14,937. So there's going to be some modest CA fee from TAP A, right, for this work?
I think
We already
that's
approved
already
that.
in our proposal.
Yeah.
Oh,
We're all
so
set.
we've already, okay, if we've already
that.
authorized it, although I thought we had only authorized it through sort of the design package, but
I
Charlie,
think
if you
Jay asked us to throw in something for a visit and a punch
Right.
list.
Yeah,
I don't think it takes anything more than that. I mean, we're
Okay.
certainly not going to go out there and hold their hands.
No, we don't want to put it all on Meg to walk through at the end and say everything was done right, where you
Yep.
no,
designed it.
I would
Yeah.
put it on Chris Conway, so don't worry.
Okay.
well, so that's where I was going with this, Jay. I just want to be sure. I want to be sure we weren't forgetting the architect in this for.
No, we have.
I think we're
we
covered.
have
Yeah.
FA under contract, and I had, like I said earlier, I had Jennifer review their quote, and she feels comfortable with it. So, yeah, we're keeping TAPE involved.
Okay, that's great. All right,
Yep.
thank you.
Right. Next meeting dates are the 25th, which will be addressing the design build again, I guess. And then
Yeah,
the
well-
8th will be the drop dead date well, not drop dead, but
No,
preferred date
preferred, and then the 22nd would be
is the
the
drop dead. Yeah.
So we'll further the conversations of it, reviewing the delivery design, the delivery methods, and we'll work to present a schedule for both delivery methods for the next meeting and try to answer any and all
Other
questions
questions.
that you guys will be submitting.
And we anticipate the meeting on the 29th. That's very brief. That's really just a procedural vote to authorize submission for schematics, right?
That's
Right.
for August 29th, yes.
Jay, I just have a quick question. I happened to be in the field yesterday, just the one boring, just make sure the driller had backfilled properly. You don't want any public to trip over. It looked like from a boring, but just make sure that the holes are being backfilled. That one near the field, Jay, it was sort of a open
Right.
hole, and you don't want anyone to.
Charlie, is that something you can relay to your team?
Charlie, you're on mute.
Sorry, just they need to backfill, yes.
Yeah, there was
You may
one
know that.
boring, Charlie, was pretty much left open, and just in case, I want the public to pull up. I
Geeta,
think
that was after they'd left the area?
That was,
They
yes,
haven't started the current.
they haven't, so
Right.
honestly, Meg, I was thinking about it too, and I wasn't sure whether it was from the previous exploration. Because I did walk through yesterday and I thought about it, they haven't come back to the site, but just take a look. It could be very well from the earlier investigation, could be wrong. The one in the field, not in the parking lot.
Okay,
Okay.
Okay. We get a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Chris, thank you. Second.
Second.
Mark, thank you. So Frank,
Aye.
Lisa,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Todd, and Geeth. Todd's still on?
I did unmute for me for some reason, yes.
Okay. Geetha
Aye.
and Chris are all set. So, all right, we're closed for tonight. Thank you, everyone. Get your questions over and we'll get them all to Hill and Tape on Monday.
Okay.
Thanks,
we'll see you on the 25th.
Great,
Okay.
thanks.
Have a good night.
You.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, good night.
Record.